This program is presented by University of California Television. Like what you learn? Visit our website or follow us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest UCTV programs.
Welcome to A Conversation with History. I'm Harry Chrysler of the Institute of International Studies. Our guest today is Didier Fassin, who is the James D. Wolfson Professor at the School of Social Science at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. He is the 2016 Tanner Lecturer at Berkeley. An anthropologist and a sociologist, he was trained as a physician in internal medicine and public health. His recent books include The Empire of Trauma, an inquiry into the condition of victimhood, Humanitarian Reason, a moral history of the present, Enforcing Order, an ethnography of urban policing, At the Heart of the State, the Moral World of Institutions. His new book, Impress, is entitled Prison Worlds, an ethnography of the carceral world. Didier, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised south of Paris in the outskirts of the French capital. I spent my childhood and adolescence in a housing project. My parents were my mother secretary and my father blue-collar worker in a car factory.
And looking back, how did your parents shape your thinking about the world?
I think my father in particular had a sense of duty, of righteousness, and he was absolutely not an intellectual. Neither my mother was, but they both had this principle that you find in working class families, where you have to work on meritocracy principles.
And when you say a housing project, was it one where there were minorities and immigrants?
Absolutely. Yeah. But the difference with the housing projects as they are now is at that time they were more mixed. So they were all working class people, low income, but you would find French as well as immigrants. And this is the surroundings and the friends I had when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. And what imbued you with the ethos of education and training?
Well, I would say that there was not much in this working class and housing project environment, and school was a way to escape that through the studies, but also through the possibilities of perhaps doing something different. And I remember that for my parents, and probably they told me that when I was a child, or maybe a little later, a posteriori, that for them, having a child a son who would be a physician was something that was simply impossible to imagine, because it seems such a distant social world. So so yes, I think the school was this place where you could move from one world to another.
And your first career, shall we say, was as a physician. So you went to medical school?
I went to medical school, and I had decided to study medicine at the time of the Liberation War of Bangladesh. That's one of the first moments when we had in 1971, 1972. On television, you would see the situations of the Bangladeshi and the intervention of the Indian Army, and so so this is when I decided to study medicine with the idea that I would perhaps at some point go abroad and do some work in other countries.
Is this common in France, or was this unique to your career, the notion that you would apply these skills in worldwide humanitarian work?
Well, at the time it was certainly not common, but there was a minority that came out in almost in that same period. That's the famous Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, and so my case was certainly not unique, but in my class at the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Paris, I didn't know any other friend or student who had this view for his future.
So in your career in medicine, you essentially became a doctor with a constituency that was worldwide. So first you went to Bangladesh.
So no. So when I became a physician, I did what what my colleagues at the time were doing. So except that I had taken a test to remain in the public hospital. So I worked in public hospitals in France. I became a specialist in internal medicine and infectious diseases, and at some point I had the opportunity before doing my civil service, which for physicians could at the time replace the military service. So my civil service I did in Tunisia, but before that I went to Calcutta, where I worked as the physician in charge of the Home for Dying Destitutes. So I started in a very banal way, being in a public hospital, being an intern and then a resident. And at some point there was this bifurcation that was open to me of doing what I had wanted to do when I started medicine. So part of my work as a physician, a good part of it, has been working in France in public hospitals, and at some point doing some international work in these two countries, India and Tunisia.
And then later, really all over the world, on different continents.
So later. So after I became an anthropologist and a social scientist, I returned to medicine in two different ways. First, I created and became the coordinator for several years of a socio-medical unit in a public hospital near Paris. An area where there were a lot of immigrants, some of them being undocumented, and so having no medical insurance. And so I opened this unit to take care of their medical, social, and even legal problems. And so that's one thing. And the other one is that I became involved. I had been for a long time with different non-governmental organizations, including Doctors of the World, which was a dissident branch of Doctors Without Borders. But at some point I was asked to join the administration board and later become vice president of Doctors Without Borders. And but at that time I was a professor at the university, and so I was not going in the field as much as I had done before. So I was more contributing to the politics and the reflection around the politics of the humanitarian organization.
Now, from medicine, I surmise that, and this is a guess, so correct me, that you honed your skills in terms of listening to people, to their case studies, and I guess you became aware, I suspect, of the relationship of their story, their biography, what you were learning in the consult, and the relationship to the body, really, that a sense of the body as separate from that.
Yeah, I have really enjoyed the time when I was involved in clinical medicine. I liked the relationship you had with people, especially toward the end of my medical career, because I was working with these undocumented immigrants, and we had more time to spend with them to understand their problems. But more generally, I think that most of the time we don't get very deep in the personal histories and the social context of the patient that we have in clinical medicine. In fact, I did a study of 100 cases seen in the emergency room, and there was not one case in which the social context of the person had been asked in the public hospital where I did this study. And I think that's very revealing of an interaction which is very much concentrated on the body, as you said, examining it, finding the symptoms and signs that will lead you to a diagnosis and perhaps a treatment. So this personal, deeper interaction is something that I didn't really find with medicine. I found it, but at a very superficial level.
And at some point, do you then decide that you need to do more in your education in terms of theoretical and in terms of anthropology and ethnography?
Well, I think that it came with my experience of going to India and then Tunisia, but India in particular. And this encounter with a different world, which I had no experience of before, was marked by, I think retrospectively, by two elements. One is the extreme inequality that you find in a city like Calcutta. And it is very puzzling to see the gap between the wealthy and the very, very poor people. And the other one was this vibrant culture that was so different from a Western culture. So I think this combination of inequality and culture brought me to a form of a questioning, which I realized afterwards. I didn't even know the word anthropology, which I realized could find some answers by studying the social science. And in France, we have an intellectual tradition in social science in which we don't separate sociology and anthropology very much. So I was in fact a professor of sociology, and I was a director of studies in anthropology, and so that helped to make this combination between what I found interesting in different cultures and what I found so important to understand about inequality.
You are an ethnographer on the one hand, but you also seem to be a theorist. And so I like to ask my guests the skills and temperament that they think are involved in the work they do. What are really important skills for the ethnographer?
For the ethnographer, I think what is needed is first of all, obviously, a deep interest in in the worlds that you study and the people who inhabit these worlds. That's, I think, both the motivation and I don't know if it's a skill, but at least a competence that you should have. Then what is extremely important is the humility. When you do an ethnography, you come into the lives of people who have never asked to have someone getting in their existence, and so you have to be very available for them, and sometimes that happened to me in my work in Ecuador, for example, or South Africa. People would let you wait for half a day before spending some time with you, and this is this experience of understanding that you have to be open to the moments when people want to give you some of their time. So I think these are two qualities or elements that are needed. Patience is also something that is important, because ethnography is really based on duration, on spending time. It's completely different from doing interviews, for example.
Or journalism.
Journalism, of course. I've been working on the police, and I spent 15 months studying police units in a specific area. I didn't do a study of the whole country, whereas journalists working, some of them working on the same topic, would spend one night with the police and then do an article. And so the different jobs, different practice and different ethos, I think.
There also seems to be an element of sympathy here, and a respect for the integrity of the culture that you're immersing yourself in. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be curious about genuinely curious. So you don't come with your opinions that you would impose. So even if you disagree with what people say or think or the way they act, this is not something that you have to put forward. You have to try to understand really, and you have to respect individually also. That is to respect the persons they are, and of course it is often relatively easy, because especially if you do, like I've been doing, work with people who are in difficult situation because they are asylum seekers, because they are undocumented immigrants, because they are AIDS patients or AIDS orphans. But it becomes a little more difficult when you deal with people who are, for example, police officers. Mm-hmm. and still you need to have this this sympathy, which does not mean that you will approve of what they do, but still you have to have to try to have this understanding and this neutrality at the same time with what you see.
And you're listening, you're questioning, you're being present. And when I say questioning, you're not being adversarial. You're really trying to figure out. It's like a puzzle. You're trying to figure out what's going on here. What motivates this cop on, that's part of this crime squad?
Yeah, as you say, a puzzle is a metaphor that I use, taking it from Georges Perec, his book on Life User's Manual, yes, the work with the police is consisted as ethnography more generally, really first of all in a presence, and trying to be as discreet as possible, not to interfere with their interactions with the public, not to comment on what would have happened, or to comment at least in a questioning way, asking why did things happen this way, rather than appearing to be judgmental, because then people close themselves. And it is this puzzle that you try to reconstitute through this long time. When in the work with the police, my main experience, which I realized after a long time that was a shared experience with the police, was boredom. Nothing happened most of the time. And so what does it mean for police officers who are supposed to be in action all the time, arresting thugs, as they say, and thieves, to be in the car or to be walking in the street and having nothing to do except trying to look around. So this ethnography for me is, of course, a method where you spend this long period of time with people, but it's also an experience that you share with the people, and this experience is extremely important for the last dimension of ethnography, which etymologically is writing. So ethnography is about writing also, and the writing moment is, I think, as important as the work you've been doing in the field.
And I'm curious about that, and that is, you go out with the police, you come home, and then you do your notes, or are you taking notes as you're going around with the police?
No, I could not record. That was I would have liked to, but that was impossible.
By record, you mean a tape recorder?
With a tape recorder.
Yeah.
So I was not allowed to have one, and I didn't cheat on that. And I could not, or I would not take notes while being in the car, because that would have put me in a different position with the police. If people are speaking and you're taking notes, it put them on the defensive in a way, and I prefer to try to let them be like as much as possible as if I were not present. Of course, I know that I was. I know that some things, for example, physical violence would not happen because I was present most of the time. but at least I try to avoid this this too obvious presence of the researcher with writing white people. So I had this conversation with them, and when I was back home, I would immediately start to write. That's what I did with my work on the prison. Also, I would rarely take notes. I did sometimes in the prison because there was the spaces were different, but in the car with the police, I didn't do that.
We'll go back to writing in a minute, but I do want to pick up one other element. In your new book, you talk about the multidimensional perspective of your work. Talk to us about that, because that means you're not just following the officer on the beat or the officer in the squad car. You're talking to their superiors, you're talking to their administrators, and so on.
Yeah, so I think ethnography gives us a very unique approach of certain social worlds, like the one of the police, the one of the prison, or the one of disaster victim, as I've done in the past. But it is never sufficient, or it should not. I'm not, although I've been influenced by interactionism, but I'm not an interactionist in the sense that I don't think that, although they would not say it exactly in this way, but everything is played in the moment of the interaction. I like to first of all to multiply the perspectives from other people in their immediate environment, like the superior, but also inhabitants of the neighborhoods where the police intervene. And then I try to inscribe or interpret these local scenes and this the life of these institutions in a broader framework or background, which is both historical and political. And I try to, for example, to understand the evolution of the police or the prison system in France over the years. I try to understand the composition, the socio-demographic composition of who are the police officers, who are the correctional officers, because this is very indicative and very essential to understand to the understanding of why they act the way they act.
So this is the other hat that you wear, and I'll call it a theorist, basically, because what you're bringing is history, sociology, anthropology to step back. And you write somewhere that you see yourself operating at the frontier between inside and outside. So wearing this new hat, it is incumbent upon you to be detached in a way and to become the scholar of how we got to a particular place with the police, with humanitarianism, with the prisons, and in order to give a fuller picture of what this means. Because you're coming to an understanding that the people who are the actors in the situation, the police, the prisons, they may not understand.
Absolutely. So the idea of the threshold of the cave, which is of course Plato's cave. Michael Walzer in his book on the Company of Critics, Michael Walzer, who is my colleague at the Institute for Advanced Study, used this metaphor to oppose the intellectuals or thinkers or theorists who are outside the cave and look at the world and the illusions that people have within the cave, whereas others, and he counts himself as one of them, try to be close to the people and try to understand them and their contradictions and their dilemmas, etc. And what I've proposed to do and what I've tried to do is, and that had been a very intense debate in France between Pierre Bourdieu, who was on the first side, the outside of the cave, to use this allegory, and Luc Boltanski, his student, who was rather inside. And I thought that being on the threshold was not only a way to avoid this debate, but precisely to show that as an ethnographer, you have to be with the people, you have to try to understand them, you have to try, and you have to be honest about how much you owe them in your comprehension of the world, and how much you must recognize their intelligence of the world, how they understand the world in which they are, and help you understand. But this is not sufficient, because people are blind on certain things. They may want to avoid seeing certain things or understanding certain logics of what they do and why they do it. And moving outside the cave is a way to bring a critical, broader perspective on things that escape them, as they would escape any of us when we are in our world. So it's this combination of moving inside and outside that I try to do, and theory, in particular critical theory, is I think a way to do it, and also for me critical theory is also a way to find larger issues in the transformation of contemporary societies.
And in all of these areas that you work, what you find by putting this together, the ethnography on the one hand, the theory and history and sociology on the other, is that what people think is going on isn't actually going on. Or if they set a set of moral standards for what they're doing, this mix of ethnography and theory leads you often to a conclusion that something else is going on. And often what is at work here is a hidden inequality, shall we say.
Absolutely. And I think one of the ways I use theory, and in a sense anthropology as such, is the capacity to be surprised, to be astonished by what we usually take for granted. What we take for granted, in particular in moral dimension. So what we think is good, what we think is bad, and so it's not a relativist perspective. It's not to say what you think is good, in fact, is bad, or all values are possible. It is a way to step aside and try to do what Michel Foucault was writing about for the bicentenary of what is enlightenment, the text by Kant, and saying that critique is really in that capacity to question what we take for granted, what we think as self-evident. So this is one aspect in which I think that our work as social scientists can bring something. For example, since I'm now working on punishment, the fact that in other societies or in other times, in our own society, the treatment by society of violations of the law were not in terms of punishing or inflicting a suffering, but were very much involved in an economy of exchange, of repaying a debt, which you find some elements still in our law today, and even more in the Islamic law. So this is the kind of questioning that I think anthropology allows us. It allows us by the fact that we work in different societies, and we understand that the world as we know it, especially the world that is close to us, is only one of the possibilities, and probably not the ultimate possibility. And so this is interesting both from an intellectual perspective, and I would say also from a political or citizen perspective. The world is what it is, but it could have been different, and it can still be different depending on the actions of men and women. So it gives a connection between intellectual activity and possible political activity.
Let's take some examples. So in the study of humanitarianism, the good appears to be people doing worthwhile things for people who are suffering because of illness, of war, of natural disaster, and so on. But as you probe this, what you discover is that there is an inequality and there is an emphasis on the suffering, which obscures the biographies and the stories that the people have to tell. And so what makes us feel very good, say in the West, about we're doing raises all sorts of questions, because in the end, this charity, in quotes, is displacing an understanding of the political issues that are at stake both locally and internationally.
So I think that's a very good example of how critical thinking can help us address an issue such as humanitarianism. Of course, there's a general sense that humanitarianism is good, assisting people or aiding individuals who are in dire situations, in conflict, in disasters, in famine, in poverty. And I'm not questioning that, whether it's good or bad. What I'm trying to, first of all, understand is why is it that in the late 20th century, humanitarianism has become such an important part of the way we govern population, and from international relations to local worlds of neighborhoods.
Charitable contributions,
exactly,
philanthropy. Yeah.
Exactly. So this has not been forever, and so first of all, to try to identify that it's a new phenomenon, and it's a new phenomenon that is deeply with a contradiction that is, I think, indepassable, and that's what we can call an aporia, which is, on the one hand, it is a solidarity, so you want to help people, but on the other hand, there's a structural inequality that is at stake. So the one who is helping is asymmetrical from the one who is being helped. And when I say that, it's not that I want to criticize one aspect or the other. It's that it will help us understand, first of all, the resentment that people who are helped sometimes express against or toward the person who helped them, but also on the side of the helper, the kind of compassion fatigue that they very often express. So that's a very general element about the deep contradiction in humanitarianism. And when I say it's impossible, it's because it is the core of humanitarianism. It's not because you will be a better humanitarian worker, and of course you can, but that you will change that. That's a very deep element. But then, as you said, you have a series of consequences that you see on the ground in the field of this humanitarian intervention. One is that you, because you want to speak for the victims of this situation that where you intervene, you are inclined to speak in their stead and to make their voice much less heard. Sometimes these voices are difficult to be heard anyway. But for example, you have people, young people in Palestine who see themselves as struggling for their country, and you transform them into victims of trauma, for example, and they are, of course, but then you obliterate the other aspect that they want.
The political problem, you don't address.
Exactly. So you transform a political message that they have into a moral or sometimes even medical or psychological issue. But there's also at a more general level, and we see that toward the end of the 20th century and beginning of the new one, the language of humanitarianism has tended to replace and make less hearable the language of social justice. And it's not because the humanitarian workers are against social justice. It's just that it occupies a space that was previously more legitimately occupied by social justice. And for example, if you to continue on Palestine, because I've been doing some work on the humanitarian actions in Palestine, you see that when you transform resistance into resilience, violence into trauma, you're changing the perception that we have of this political context. So this is the kind of thing that I try to do on humanitarianism. It's not a frontal critique, and I've been involved in that, and I have no regret in having been so. But it's really trying to precisely, as an insider, but also now an outsider, try to understand what are the stakes and what are the consequences of this humanitarian government as we have it.
One of the important points that need to be made is that although you take a particular case and immerse yourself in that particular case, that the end result of this is kind of a general statement, analysis, a critical theory, rendering, understanding that applies elsewhere. And so that I was struck in reading your book on the police in this French suburb filled with immigrants and refugees, that it was very applicable for understanding what has been going on in the United States and led to the Black Lives Matter movement here, where police, and you use the term, quoting Benjamin, rule by exception, basically. And so it really helps an American understand what's going on in our own ghettos, even though that was not the focus of your work.
I think what you're saying is very important. Ethnography, because of the very deep involvement in time and energy that it requires, cannot be multiplied in different sites, countries, and it can be under certain limit. For example, when you work with a team, which is what I've been doing a few years ago. We were 10 researchers and exploring by ethnography the state, as we said, the French state. So some were working in the justice system, other in prison, other with the police, other with the social workers, etc. But as an individual, you spend in the case of the prison, 4 years in the same facility, in the same short stay prison. And of course, an answer that you can, or a reaction that you can get is, what you described here is valid for this place, but of course is not valid for everywhere. And of course, that is true. I could not assert that what I've described with the police in one place or the prison in another place would be generalizable to all the prison and all the police. But I think the question of generalization has to be thought in two different ways, which can be represented in the following. So you have an horizontal generalization, meaning that, for example, those who do epidemiological studies or statistical studies, and they take a sample, and because this sample is randomly chosen, they can generalize to the whole population. That's how the polls are working for political opinions, for example. So this is a horizontal generalization. What you've seen in different places, you can say that's true for the whole group. There's a different type of generalization that ethnography and other methods can allow, is what I would call a vertical generalization, meaning that you can identify a process, a logic, why, for example, the police react in a certain way to certain type of situation, and this can be generalized, not in the sense that you could say all the police everywhere in the world, anywhere in the world, can act in the same way, but these ways of acting you will find everywhere, and of course, if it's not even generalizable to the place where you've been working. But the processes, the logic, the mechanism are to be found everywhere, and I think that's a very powerful argument for ethnography, and this has also political implication, because when you do a work on the police in France and your colleagues tell you, well, it's valid in this place, but it has no validity elsewhere, it means that you cannot take any general conclusions. But when you go to Brazil or to the United States or to South Africa, and you meet colleagues who are criminologists and who've read your work and say, this is exactly what we see, they don't mean that the police in South Africa, Brazil, or the United States are the same as the police in France, but the mechanism, the processes they find are the same.
So that in a way, I mean, when I read your book and I thought about the American ghettos, what you see is a similarity in the fact that these are underprivileged, poverty-ridden communities, and I see an emphasis on law and order that's coming from the top, and that in the case of Europe is mingled with concerns about terrorism, creating quotas to arrest and harass people in these areas, whether it's through checking their pockets for marijuana or enforcing traffic tickets, that then create a loop in which these people, something else is going on besides law enforcement. In the case of the police, there's a bigger picture here that is rooted in inequality and actually politics, because the people over the police, for example, are creating quotas to measure and and the politicians want to respond to the fear of people.
Yeah, it's very important to link what you see on the ground, the way the police are acting, with the institution that they belong to, the profession in which they in which they participate, and the general policies. And and when you have law and order policies, when you have from the police academy to the supervision of their work, when you have the idea that certain neighborhoods are to be police property in a sense, where the welfare state is not very consistent, and you turn to the repressive side. So this is something that has to be taken into account to understand that in the end, and that's what I try to show in enforcing order, is that instead of enforcing a public order, what happens is that the police are enforcing social order. So they remind the people of low income, minority background, and living in housing projects in particular, they remind them their place in society. So it's not that they would arrest criminals or that they would stop drug dealers. They harass young men, or sometimes immigrants, but most of the time young men of immigrant background, and they know them, and they ask them their documents, and then they search them, and they do that every day. So you cannot think of this as public security or public order, and in fact their superior know that very, very well. They've told me that these units were often creating more problem than they were solving. But then you have to ask yourself, so why are they working in these neighborhoods if it's not mainly, I'm not saying that they're not arresting criminals in some cases, of course, but their main role is to maintain not a public order, but a social order. And that's what you find, obviously, in the kind of relationship that you see in the American inner cities, for example.
In your new book, which is in press, I saw this line in reading the parts that I've read. Ethnography derives from a project whereby the anthropologist strives both to understand, and we've talked a lot about how you come to understand, and to lead others to understand. So I guess I want to ask you about the second part. That is, how do these insights, do you have an impact? How do you think they have an impact? And how do you hope they will impact society and actual policy?
In recent years, I've tried to reflect more than I used to, and more than we do in anthropology and sociology, on what I've called the public afterlife of ethnography, or the public afterlife of our work more generally. So we as social scientists usually think that there's an empirical and theoretical moment in our work, and then we translate this ethnography or statistics and theorization of it into articles, books, and then we move on to the next project. And I think we can first of all be more attentive to the kind of interactions we have with our public, and also try to extend the public's that we have. So we know that, for example, the economists, at least some of them, publish their very specific articles in the best journal of their disciplines. But they can also write books that have a more general audience. And we, even the anthropologists have done that. You have Claude Lévi-Strauss writing structural anthropology, or before that writing the on kinship and the elementary form of kinship. But at the same time, we're writing tristotropique. So the question is, how can you reach a public that is not just your colleagues, but a broader audience, if the topics on which you work are of general interest? And this goes somewhat against some of the academic rules, or at least academic habitus. And but I think it's important for the social sciences, and perhaps anthropology in particular, to reach out for broader audiences, to have a place in the public sphere, because we produce empirical and theoretical elements that can be appropriated either by the policymakers or by the activists or by the population themselves. So this public afterlife, I think, should be taken into account more, much more than it is the case.
I regret to say our time is up, but I want to thank you very much for these powerful insights into the work of ethnography and critical theory. And I do want to propose to our audience that they take a look at some of the books we've discussed: Humanitarian Reason, Enforcing Order and Ethnography of Urban Policing, At the Heart of the State, The Moral World of Institutions, and finally your new book in press, Prison Worlds. So thank you very much, Didier, for being with us.
Thank you, Harry.
And thank you very much for joining us for this conversation with history.